Hey everybody, welcome back to Historical-ish. In this video, I'll be going over the second half of the first tier in the Ancient Mysteries Iceberg from our first video. If you haven't seen that video, click right here, and hopefully this time the video won't be in 480p. Premiere Pro, we're still kind of getting used to the settings on that, so we're going to do everything manually this time when we export it, so hopefully it'll be better quality. Anyways, I'll shut up and let's get into it. Number 11, the Nazca Lines. These are a collection of geoglyphs made in the dirt in southern Peru, and pretty much they're just trenches dug on the ground to resemble different animals and plants. Some of these animals include a hummingbird, fish, monkey, lizard, spider, and condor, and they're estimated to be created between 500 BC and 500 CE. There are two main types, the first being the paracas, which were made between around 400 to 200 BC, and then there's the Nazca between 200 BC and 500 CE. Both of which were made by people removing stones and digging up the dirt to reveal a darker colored soil, and the climate of the area being so dry and empty that these depressions are naturally preserved. The Nazca Lines have a combined length of over 800 miles total, and most shapes are made using one continuous line. These things are massive, and it's pretty crazy because the best way to view them is from around 1,600 feet in the air, and this actually is the main mystery that deals with the Nazca Lines because you can't view them down on ground level. Some researchers believe that the Nazca Lines were designed as astronomical markers to show where different plants and stars would be at certain times of the year, while others simply believe they were designed to be seen by their gods from the sky. Some pretty crazy alternative theories range from rituals to summon water, or making irrigation schemes, to even ancient astronaut theory, which states extraterrestrials use these lines as landing pads or guides for their spacecraft. Number 12, the Trojan War. So everyone is familiar with the story of Troy and the Trojan horse, and the mystery here is, did the war actually happen and did the city actually exist? In the late 19th century, Heinrich Schliemann traveled to Turkey to find Troy as he had heard rumors of it being in the west coast of Anatolia at a site called Hisarlik. During his excavations, he found artifacts which are dated around the collapse of the Late Bronze Age, which we talked about in the previous video, so it very well could have been during that time period, as there was numerous sites of war during that time. Hisarlik was also found to be the location of around 9 cities, all built upon the previous one of which very well could have been Troy. Some researchers agree that Troy was a real place, but due to the lack of information available, it is almost impossible to tell if it was real and if the fabled war actually occurred. Number 13, when was Jesus born? Most people believe that Jesus was born on December 25th in the year 1 AD, but most scholars agree that this wasn't on that day or in that year. The Roman Catholic Church picked December 25th to coincide with the winter solstice and Saturnalia, which was a festival for the Roman deity Saturn, making it easy to convert the population as well as other pagan religions in the area. The general theory is that Jesus was born between 6 BC and 4 BC based on the biblical story of King Herod trying to kill baby Jesus, which is closely followed by the death of King Herod himself. Although the date of King Herod's death is also disputed, most historians believe it was around 4 BC. And like I said in the first episode when talking about the Star of Bethlehem, the aligning of Venus and Jupiter in 2 BC, or the aligning of Saturn and Jupiter in 7 BC, could point to those years being the year of his birth. This is a highly contested topic with a wide range of theories, but I honestly doubt anyone will actually be able to know for sure the date of Jesus' birth. Number 14, where's the tomb of Alexander the Great? After the death of Alexander, the possession of his body became a hot topic between his generals because every single one of them wanted claim over his body. In 321 BC, the caravan containing his body was hijacked by one of his generals and rerouted to Egypt. His body was originally buried in Memphis and later moved to Alexandria, where it became the focal point of the Ptolemaic cult of Alexander the Great. The last attestation that holds any merit whatsoever was in 1494 by Leo Africanus, who supposedly visited the tomb early in his life. Although over 140 official attempts have been made to locate the site, none of them have succeeded. And there are many different legends and theories on where his body is, ranging from Greece, Syria, and Venice, but most still point to Alexandria as the most likely place. Number 15, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and they were described as a magnificent series of ascending tiered gardens. So pretty much imagine a tiered and terraced agriculture of the Incas, but just on a massive scale. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon had overhanging levels of numerous variety of trees, plants, and vines that all came together to form essentially a giant green mountain. According to one legend, the Hanging Gardens were built alongside a grand palace known as the Marvel of Mankind by Neo-Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II. He ruled between 605 505 and 562 BC. And this was made for his Median wife, Queen Amidus, because she missed the green hills and valleys of her homeland. The Hanging Gardens are actually the only one of the 7 wonders where the location has not yet been found. It's said to be along the Euphrates River, and there are also some theories that it's actually bordering the Tigris River. However, one researcher believes she has found the location of the gardens, but they are located in Nineveh, which is about 300 miles north of Babylon. She also claims that the site was constructed a century earlier in the Assyrian Empire by King Sennacherib, and there are numerous other accounts of a site that was wondrous and technologically advanced at the time. And technologically advanced at the time is just in reference to needing a complex irrigation system to keep the gardens alive. Nineveh was also renamed New Babylon when the Assyrians conquered the Babylonians in 689 BC, after the king marveled and was inspired by Babylon's gates. There's actually some artwork of the gardens with a representation of a huge tower in the background, which is very similar to the Tower of Babel, also said to be in Babylon, but the time period of its destruction is a whole 2 millennia off when the gardens were built, or even first recorded in history. So this comparison and possible relation is highly doubted. Personally, I think the Assyrian theory seems to be the most plausible explanation for why we haven't discovered this ancient lost wonder yet. Number 16, the Moai. These are the famous human figures carved from a volcanic rock in Rapa Nui or Easter Island. They're carved between the years 1250 and 1500, and almost half of them still remain within the quarry where they were first carved. Just like a lot of other ancient mysteries, the question boils down to why and how. I would like to note that these things are massive. The tallest erected Moai was 33 feet tall and the heaviest was 85 tons. One unfinished Moai would have been around 70 feet tall and over 150 tons if it was actually completed. Many archaeologists believe these statues were used to hold the spirits of deceased ancestors, as well as representing the status of the chief who commissioned it. In the 19th century, it was believed that the island was the remnant of a sunken continent which took the remaining Moai with it, and many of you may have heard of this as the continent of Mu. Some oral history among the population tells a tale of people with divine powers such as kings or hermits commanding the statues to walk to their known locations now, but some widely accepted theories on how they got to their locations include being walked with ropes by tilting them to either side, as well as rolling them over logs. Either way, it would have taken a huge amount of manpower to get these to where they are, and that's one of the mysteries that remains today. Number 17, Sodom and Gomorrah. This is another biblical story, and Sodom and Gomorrah were 2 cities that were infested with sin and wickedness, as mentioned in the Bible. Genesis 19 shows the acts of the people that lived in the cities attempted on the angels, or messengers sent from God, to save Abraham's nephew Lot and his family from their destruction. The biblical narrative goes like this. God sent 2 angels to destroy Sodom. Lot welcomes them into his home, but all the men of the town surround the house and demand that he surrender the visitors so they may know them. It's kind of a funny way to say commit adultery, but okay. Lot offers the mob his virgin daughters. That's not very nice. And says, "Do to them as you please." But they refuse and threaten to do worse to Lot. The angels strike the crowd blind. The angels tell Lot, "The outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." The next morning, because Lot had lingered, the angels took Lot, Lot's wife, and his 2 daughters by the hand and out of the city, and told them to flee to Zoar. Then God rained sulfur and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities. Lot and his 2 daughters are saved, but his wife disregards the angel's warnings, looks back, and is turned into a pillar of salt. So there's a couple of things to unwrap here. First, the cities actually exist. Many scholars and archaeologists believe that the city Tal el Hammam underwent a catastrophe in the form of a cosmic air blast in the country of Jordan around 650 BC. This is pretty much just a meteor that explodes before reaching land. And they believe this city, and the surrounding metropolis, as 3 other cities have been found in the region, was destroyed by a rapid wave of heat and wind. Because there is no impact crater around the site, scientists believe that a cosmic object exploded before reaching the ground and caused a blast that was 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb used at Hiroshima. For context, this would have put the flash temperatures around 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, and it would have sent a shockwave traveling at 740 miles per hour. So the only thing that are left at this site is the foundation of the buildings, but no records or writings have ever been found. So the oral traditions brought down through the generations may have inspired the biblical story, or the biblical story was the original event and God essentially sent a nuke in the form of a meteor to wipe the metropolis out because of their sins. The last point that I want to mention, which is pretty interesting, the story of Lot's wife, who turned around to look at the destruction, or in symbolical remembrance of living a sinful life and regretting leaving, was turned into a pillar of salt by God. Moses was also taken to this pillar when God was showing him the promised land to the 12 tribes of Israel, coming to the end of their exodus from Egypt. Oddly enough, there seems to be a pillar of salt that dates back to the accepted time frame, and some biblical literists in all three Abrahamic religions believe this actually to be Lot's wife, turned into salt or stone and frozen dead in time. But obviously there's a lot of difficulty trying to come up with a scientific explanation for any event like that. We may never know if there's any validity to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and what happened to Lot's wife, but it's definitely cool to think about how real places and events that have taken place line up very well with the biblical narrative. Number 18, the Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba was a biblical figure who visited King Solomon, but her actual existence is what's in question here. There's no mention in the Bible of who she was or where she came from, but some biblical scholars have made connections to Sheba, the grandson of Ham's son Noah via Cush, which is in the land south of Egypt. But according to Arab and Islamic sources, the Queen of Sheba ruled over the land in what is now modern-day Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula, while Ethiopian records indicate she ruled over the Aksumite Empire in modern-day Ethiopia. What's interesting about this is that both of these areas in the 10th century BC were both ruled over by the same empire, which is exactly the proposed time which she was supposed to be alive. Both cultures do claim to have the birthplace of the Queen of Sheba, and obviously this can't be true, so unless something else is uncovered, there isn't much more evidence pointing one way or another. Number 19, what knowledge may have been lost at the Library of Alexandria? This is one of my favorite topics to cover, as there's no way of truly knowing the amount of information held within this library, some of which could probably answer some of the mysteries on this iceberg. It was commissioned in the early 2nd century BC by Ptolemy I and II, and stood for nearly 300 years before it was destroyed. It claimed to hold all written knowledge in existence within its walls, with some of the ancient authors claiming it held around 700,000 different books. It was partially destroyed by Julius Caesar in 48 BC, but it had already begun to be in disuse for a while by this point. Although modern scholars believe that there were significantly less books than originally claimed by ancient authors, and that most of the books would have been copies in other locations, there's no telling what kind of knowledge was lost during its destruction. This lost knowledge quite possibly could have set back civilizations a couple of centuries. So there is a pretty wild theory that I've recently heard that connects the Library of Alexandria to the Vatican's secret archives. So as everyone knows, the Vatican is in the middle of Rome, which was the capital of the time of the Roman Empire, when Julius set fire to the Library of Alexandria in 48 BC. And the Vatican's secret archives, which have been secret to the public for the majority of its existence, only lets top researchers study texts that they already know exist. Nobody is allowed to browse through the archives, and you have to request stuff in order to study them, and there's a maximum of 3 texts or books a day that a researcher can study. There's around 53 miles of shelf space, and you can't go look through it all, and this is wild because there's so many ancient documents or even relics in there that being hidden, and nobody even knows that they exist. But the theory goes, what if Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire stole the documents from the Library of Alexandria, burned it to the ground as a cover-up for stealing the world's most ancient documents, and were keeping them and all of their secrets away from public eye? Notably, though, Rome was not Christian at this time, obviously because this was in 48 BC, but could have Rome stored these texts away, and when the Vatican was established after the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, could these texts have been taken into the new archive and kept in secret for over a millennia? I'll let you decide for yourself, but I did think that was pretty interesting. And the last one for Tier 1, number 20, where was the Garden of Eden? The Garden of Eden is one of, if not the most iconic story in the Bible. It's first mentioned in Genesis 2 and details the story of Adam and Eve. The only thing that's really said about the garden is that it was in Eden, which was a land in the east, and that there are 4 rivers that watered the garden: the Pishon, the Gihon, Tigris, and the Euphrates. It also states where these rivers flowed to and what these areas were known for. Other than that, there's no real hints about where the garden was located. There are a couple of different theories or interpretations of these descriptions, and the first being that the location would be somewhere around the Tigris and Euphrates, since these rivers have remained relatively unchanged since ancient times. As for the 2 mysterious rivers, the Gihon is said to be linked to the land of Cush, with its ties being the Dez and Karun rivers in Iran. And I will note that there are many different cities with the name of Cush in ancient times. The Pishon River is theorized to have dried up, as there are satellite images of a dried riverbed that leads into western Arabia, in which Havilah is said to have been located with its abundant gold. All 4 of these rivers meet and are said to all empty together into the Persian Gulf, which some theorize the garden was located in. The other side says that during the biblical flood, or the Younger Dryas, whichever you prefer, made sea levels rise over 400 feet and drastically changed the geography of the area, meaning there's no real way of telling where the garden could have been since the geography is drastically different. If the Garden of Eden actually did exist, then both of these theories are possible, but I don't think we'll ever actually know. So that about wraps it up for Tier 1. I know these are pretty basic ideas, but the farther we move down the iceberg, it gets pretty crazy from here. So if you enjoyed watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, but at the very least, thanks for watching.